Alright, so in the spirit of trying to make some videos to help uh, the buyers, the new owners of our property here, off-grid property, I'm going to try to put together some videos kind of itemizing some of the systems that are running here. Um, the first one I'm doing here is the diesel heater. The people in van life and RV life and truckers, they probably know about diesel heaters. If you know anything about a diesel engine and basic electrical, something running a fan, something running a glow plug igniter, it's pretty easy to understand, but the application here is a little bit different because it's heating a tiny home. And it's not a permanent, well, it's a permanent setup, but it's not a final product. Is something that we tried last year. We tried it with a smaller one, figured out it wasn't a big enough one, got a bigger one, and it's been working great. Now the last few days, obviously, being in the 20s in Florida, it doesn't totally keep up, but it keeps up enough, and it's safe enough to run all night without having to worry about burning up a whole bunch of gas for a generator, or listening to a noisy generator, or leaving a propane on that creates moisture inside, things like that. And you don't have to get up and stoke a wood fire either. So it's a pretty safe alternative, and it has built-in shutdowns and all of those things. So what I'm going to walk you through is just the basics of the unit, how it works, what it does, how to operate it, what happens if you run it out of fuel, stuff like that. And this will just be a first little bit here for one of the systems on the property, of how to use it, something that can be accessed at any time from anywhere by anybody. So there we are. Stay tuned for more. I'll post more. There'll be quite a few, I'm sure, in total. But this is just the this is just the diesel heater and how it works. Enjoy. Alrighty, so I just wanted to give a little peek about the diesel heater. This is it. It's outside of the living room window, and essentially this is the heater. This is your incoming air. Goes out through here, gets heated, goes back in. From the bottom side of it, you can see there is an intake air filter here. Runs up, it sucks in air there. Exhaust comes out here and down and out this little muffler. What is wrapped up in here is the fuel pump. And the reason it's wrapped up is because they can be a little noisy. They just click. They're a click type of pump, so when it's running, it'll just click, 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 click constantly. Fuel filter going down into the fuel tank. This is the one that came with it. You can get a bigger fuel tank. This has a bendable line down in there, so you can set it to where it's just a little off of the bottom, so it doesn't pick up any garbage or anything. And that then pumps it up and goes up to this little fuel line. So all of your combustion air coming in or out is all outside. Your fuel's outside. Extra gas or diesel can. Basically, yeah, that's about it. It's able to run on 12 volt, just a standard 10 amp fuse. That's what runs the fuel pump, and also a glow plug igniter that's in the heater. And it only has to power that for usually a couple of minutes when it's first starting up, but we leave this running all night long. It uses from here possibly to down to about a half, which I believe this holds a gallon and a half. I think it's 10 liters, so it might use 5 liters per night, like a 12-14 hour night. And I'll show you what it looks like from the inside. But the outside basically is done this way for less space inside. In a van situation, this whole unit here would be inside the van. So I just used an old stand with some 3/4 pressure treated plywood to mount it to. And the jar here is for if you ever do run it out of fuel, you have to prime it. So you have to take this hose off, put it in the jar, go inside, hold down the little buttons to prime so it just runs the pump and it doesn't try to run the heater. And once you get all of the air out of the lines, then you can hook it back up and start the heater up. And what I do to protect it is pretty basic, maybe a little redneck, but it's been working for a year. And I just set that over it and a couple of little pieces here to keep the wind from blowing it off. And that way all you see is that little exhaust pipe coming out there. And yeah, so pretty easy. I'll show you what the inside looks like. Alright, so inside we have the air intake right here and the hot air coming out there. And to make it a little more movable and mobile, because during the summer you don't need all of this piping, you can just take it off from there and stick this whole thing somewhere else. But basically all it's doing is blowing into the bedroom and blowing into the living room. And the controller for it is not mounted anywhere yet. It does have a mount that you can snap it in and out of, but we never actually permanently mounted it. So to start it up, well, first to prime it, if you ever need to run it out of fuel, you do have to reprime it, and it does take quite a bit. This is long enough to stick out the window so that you can do it from outside and keep an eye on it. But all you do is press the up and down arrows at the same time. If I can manage with my cold hands. And you'll see a little icon come on for a fuel pump down there in the bottom left. And it'll just pump a little bit. Usually if you don't run out first time firing it up, you only have to do that for a few seconds, and then you'll see that icon go off. And when you hit press and hold the power button, it'll start up and you'll see the fan starts blowing. That's the glow plug igniter. The little red icon tells you that the glow plug is on. And it does take a couple of minutes to actually fire up, but once it's fired up, you'll see the fuel pump running, and that red icon for the glow plug will go away. So you'll hear the fan speed will change according to what it needs to do. It'll start out really low because it's just trying to preheat that glow plug, just like a diesel engine. And once that's hot enough, the fuel pump will kick on for a second or two, and it'll see if it can ignite it then. It'll do that a couple of times until it gets a good fire going. But once it gets really going, that glow plug will shut off. And see, there's the fuel pump kicked on for a second, and now back on. But once it really gets going, and it has sensors, so it can tell if it's ignited or not. If it's not, it'll shut itself down. Part of a safety feature of it is that, you know, you don't want to ever turn it off by disconnecting the power. You want to let it go through its normal shutdown thing, because what it will do is it'll just the opposite. It'll turn the glow plug back on and turn off the fuel pump to try to burn any unburnt fuel before the fan stops spinning. So if you just disconnect the power, the fan stops spinning, you can overheat the unit itself and have issues from there. Now, I've only had this unit for this is the second year, And I did get some contaminated fuel. You see now the glow plug is off, and fan is running, fuel pump is running, but that is the only power. And if you can hear, so now the fan is actually ramped up in speed, and it is already putting out warm air. And right now it's a little hard to tell because I do have other heaters running in here, but it reads the temperature in Celsius. So right now it is 15 degrees Celsius according to this. And you can turn the temperature or the amount of heat up from here. 3 is just where it starts out at, but 6 is the max. 5 is typically where I run it when I'm trying to really warm it up in here. You can see it's already starting to rise a little bit. But that is the diesel heater, and I'll show you what it looks like or sounds like from outside when it's running. But right now we have 57 degrees in here, and because I'm just trying to get it up to 70 real quick, we also have the propane heater, a little buddy heater. That works great to help bring it up in temp quickly. And also with the generator running, we have the in-wall unit that is electric heat, and that will also heat it up. So there's 3 different options for heat in here. And yeah, once it gets up to temp, I'll shut off any extra heaters and I'll just leave the diesel heater run overnight, and it typically will keep it just fine for us, except for like obviously 20-degree nights. Then it may not keep up, but it does keep it at least around 50, about a 30-degree difference inside versus outside. So when it gets super cold, like in the 20s, we just wait till morning. We'll come out, we'll fire up the generator and the propane heater just to bring it back up to around 70 inside, and then we shut those back off. But yeah, I'll show you what it looks like outside. Alright, so what you'll notice here is you might hear the ticking of the fuel pump, and you'll definitely hear the exhaust. It's not a pretty setup because, again, just installed it last year. Tips from van lifers and RVs and things like that. And yeah, the initial one that we tried, we actually just window mounted it, super temporary, and it just wasn't big enough. So we got this one as a 5 kilowatt. The original one we tried was a 2 kilowatt, and it just wasn't enough for the 270 something square feet that we have in our little tiny shed to home. And yeah, that's about it. So just doing this video for the new owners and anybody else that happens to find it and wonders how they could use a diesel heater to heat a tiny home. This is just the way I did it. There's plenty of other ways you could do it, and there's still plenty of ways you could modify the system. You could put a bigger fuel tank, you could build a proper shelter around it, but other than having some contaminated water in the fuel from sitting all summer, that hasn't given us any issues. So yeah, keep the water out of your fuel, and even during the summer, go ahead and run it maybe 10-15 minutes every month or two. and you shouldn't have any issue at all. Hope you enjoyed. Look out for more videos.